The life raft was 12 feet long. The ocean around it was endless. When the first shark appeared, it didn't rush. It circled slowly, the way something does when it knows it has already won. It passed beneath the hull and disappeared into the dark water below. Then it came back. Then another joined it. Jennifer Appel watched them and did not scream. She had already used up her screaming. What she felt now was something quieter and more dangerous than fear. It was a moment she understood completely and without argument that no one was coming. It was May 2017. Jennifer and Tasha Fuiava had left Honolulu bound for Tahiti on a 50-foot sailboat. The trip should have taken 3 weeks. Instead, it would take 5 months. 5 months of engine failure, broken equipment, shark attacks on the hull, starvation rations, and the specific psychological violence of being lost in an ocean that contains 64 million square miles of water, and not one person who knows where you are. This is what they endured, and how they survived it. Jennifer Appel was an experienced sailor. Not professionally, but seriously. She knew her boat. She trusted her boat. Sea Nymph was a 1979 sailboat. Older, but solid. It had made open water crossings before. Jennifer had provision for several weeks, filed a float plan with authorities, and carried an emergency beacon designed to summon rescue from anywhere on Earth. Her companion, Tasha Fuiava, was newer to sailing, but she was physically capable and carried a natural calm that Jennifer would later describe as one of the only reasons either of them made it home. They also brought 2 dogs, Zeus, a Great Dane who had sailed before and regarded the ocean with quiet curiosity, and Valentine, a younger Labrador mix who investigated everything twice. On May 3rd, 2017, they left Honolulu Harbor, raised the sails, and headed south toward Tahiti. For the first several days, everything was fine. Then the weather changed. A storm system developed in a way forecasts had not predicted. By the time Jennifer recognized what was approaching, Sea Nymph was already inside it. The ocean does not build gradually in a storm. It reorganizes. Swells that were 4 feet become 15. Wind that was 15 knots becomes 40. Rain arrives horizontally. The boat shudders, drops, twists, and you work the sails and the wheel, and you do not stop working because stopping means the sea decides for you. They came through the first storm intact. But when Jennifer checked the engine afterward, something was wrong. A roughness in the sound that hadn't been there before. The engine was damaged, not destroyed yet, but damaged. She did not turn back. Later, experts would question this decision. The answer Jennifer gave was the same answer most sailors give, because turning back requires crossing the same ocean as going forward, because the damage seemed manageable, because Tahiti was ahead, and the trade winds were supposed to hold. They were not wrong to continue. They were unlucky in what came next. The second storm arrived before June. This one was worse. In a mature Pacific storm, waves exceed 30 feet and arrive from multiple directions simultaneously. Sleep becomes something you grab in minutes. Movement below decks requires timing each step between the boat's violent lurches. Cooking is impossible. During this storm, the engine died completely, not sputtered, not degraded further. Stopped. Jennifer tried everything she knew. Nothing worked. Sea Nymph was now entirely dependent on sail, and under sail alone, a boat cannot always go where you want it to go. It goes where the wind allows. The storm pushed them north and west, away from Tahiti, away from the shipping lanes, into a section of the Pacific where vessel traffic thinned to almost nothing. Then the mast showed signs of structural failure, a critical fitting stressed by the storm, threatening to bring the whole rig down. Jennifer jury-rigged support lines to hold it together. It was not a repair. It was a delay. She activated the APIRB, the emergency beacon designed to send a satellite distress signal to Coast Guard authorities anywhere on Earth. No response came. She tried the satellite phone. Water intrusion had damaged it. The calls she managed to place did not result in any rescue operation being launched. June arrived. They were still at sea. And now, no one knew where they were. There is a specific adaptation that happens when the mind finally accepts what it cannot change. Jennifer and Tasha had passed through the phase of frantic problem solving. The engine, the communications, the course corrections. None of it had worked. What remained was what had always been there. The boat, the ocean, each other, the dogs, and whatever supplies were left. They took inventory. Water was the first crisis. Jennifer rationed immediately and severely, a fixed amount per person per day, calculated to last as long as possible. She rigged sail material and tarps to collect rainwater during squalls. In this part of the Pacific, squalls are frequent enough that the system worked. Not comfortably, but enough. Food was more manageable early. Oatmeal, rice, canned goods, but the buffer for 3 weeks is not a buffer for 5 months. Jennifer began rationing food before it became critical. This early discipline, the decision to be careful before being desperate, is one of the primary reasons they survived. The dogs complicated everything and saved everything simultaneously. Zeus and Valentine consumed food and water that Jennifer and Tasha could not spare. That is the mathematical reality. But the dogs also required care every single day. Feeding them, watering them, checking on them when the deck grew hot. The dogs needed them. And needing to be needed is sometimes the only thing that keeps a person functional when everything else has been taken away. They established routines. Jennifer maintained a daily log, positions, weather, supply calculations, observations. Tasha managed the rigging checks and hull assessments. They divided labor because division creates ownership, and ownership is the opposite of giving up. They talked for hours about food, always food, building imaginary meals out of words with precision of architects, about their lives before, about what they would do when this was over, and they had long silences that were not uncomfortable. After enough time at sea, silence between two people who trust each other completely becomes its own kind of communication. The sharks arrived in the second month, and they never entirely left. Tiger sharks are common in this section of the Pacific. They are large, typically 10 to 14 feet, and genuinely opportunistic. A drifting sailboat trailing debris, occasionally dropping food scraps, is exactly the kind of anomaly that draws them. The first encounter came at night. Jennifer heard it before she saw it. A sound against a hull. Not violent. Deliberate. The pressure of something large running its nose along the fiberglass. Investigating. She looked over the side with a flashlight and found a tiger shark longer than she initially processed. Her mind delivered the measurement in pieces, the way it does when information arrives faster than it can be organized. She did not wake Tasha. There was nothing to do. As long as the hull held, she could only watch. The encounters became regular. A fin alongside the boat during the day. That same pressure against the hull at night. Jennifer tracked them in her log the way she tracked weather. Writing things down made them manageable. An unrecorded terror is formless. A recorded one has edges. But in the third month, the sharks became aggressive. They began attacking the hull directly. Focus on the rudder and keel, the parts that protrude, that to a shark's senses resemble something prey-like. They would hit with force. The boat would shudder. Below, decks. The impact sounded like the vessel breaking apart. Jennifer began sleeping in the cockpit during these periods, listening, trying to determine whether the hull was genuinely compromised or only struck. She used a boat hook to fend them off when they came alongside. She made noise. She tried everything traditional maritime wisdom suggested about discouraging shark attention. The hull held. She wrote in her log. The sharks came again last night. The hull is holding. I am holding. I do not know for how much longer on either count. By the third month, the psychological weight had become as dangerous as the physical one. They were genuinely hungry. Not the temporary discomfort of a missed meal, but the deep, persistent insistence of bodies not receiving what they require. Physical tasks that have been unremarkable and may now require deliberate planning. Climbing forward on deck to check the rigging meant conserving energy before and after. Sustained hunger shortens concentration, makes memory unreliable, makes simple decisions require effort. Jennifer noticed this in herself and compensated. Writing more carefully in the log, double-checking calculations she would once have trusted, slowing down every decision. The uncertainty was its own specific torture, not knowing whether rescue was possible, whether they had been given up for dead, whether the APERB signal had reached anyone. Uncertainty is more exhausting than bad news, because bad news has a shape you can adapt to. Uncertainty offers nothing to push against. They argued. Of course they did. With the worn friction of two people in too small a space with too little food and too much fear. They argued about rations, about decisions made weeks earlier, about things that didn't matter, and that both of them knew didn't matter. And then they stopped, and the silence restored something. And they continued. Tasha's calm was a resource Jennifer leaned on. A refusal to catastrophize, a preference for the next practical action over contemplating how bad things were. On the days Jennifer's discipline was fraying, Tasha's steadiness provided ballast. Jennifer's competence was the resource Tasha leaned on. She knew what the sounds meant. She could read the sky. This knowledge gave them a margin that luck alone could never have provided. They kept each other alive by being different enough that each one covered what the other lacked. In the 4th month, they saw a ship, a container vessel on the horizon, running a heading that would bring it within visual range. Jennifer grabbed flares and fired. Once. Then again. She used a signal mirror that can throw reflection visible for miles. The ship did not alter course. The mind, when deprived of hope long enough, builds walls around itself to stay functional. When hope suddenly breaks through those walls and is immediately withdrawn, the pain is sharper than if hope had never appeared at all. It took days for both women to restabilize. Jennifer wrote that evening. Ship passed. We signaled. They did not come. I do not know how to describe what this feels like. I will not try tonight. They saw a second vessel in the 5th month. The same sequence. Flares. Mirror. No response. Continued horizon. The second time was different. Holler. The first time she had cried. The second time Jennifer simply watched until the vessel disappeared. Then went back to checking the rigging. Because the rigging needed checking. And the body does what the mind instructs it to do when the mind has decided that continuing is the only available option. October 25th, 2017. 5 months and 22 days after leaving Honolulu. A fishing vessel had encountered sea nymph days earlier and managed to relay a rough position before the vessels separated. The United States Navy dispatched the USS Ashland to investigate. A lookout spotted a small sailboat flying a distress flag in waters north of Japan. Jennifer had been flying that flag since the first storm. She had not taken it down once. When she saw the Navy boat coming across the water, she did not immediately trust it. She had fired flares at ships that kept going. She had signaled vessels that disappeared over the horizon. She watched the approaching boat with a careful, guarded attention, not yet willing to invest in the possibility that this time was different. Then it was close enough to see faces. Then someone was calling up to her. She sat down on the deck of Sea Nymph and could not immediately stand back up. Tasha came up from below and stood at the companionway, taking in what she was seeing. For a moment she was completely still. Then Zeus pushed past her legs and hung his enormous head over the side to investigate the newcomers. Someone in the Navy boat laughed, and that laugh broke something loose that had been locked very tight for a very long time. Both women needed immediate medical care. They were malnourished, dehydrated, and physically reduced in the specific way that long-term deprivation produces. Not dramatically, but fundamentally, as if the body had compressed itself to conserve what remained. Physical recovery took months. The nutritional deficit of 5 months of severe rationing does not correct in days. Genuine sleep, restorative sleep rather than the fractured watchfulness of the boat, took weeks to return. Jennifer's first request when brought aboard was for her log. 5 months of entries, positions, weather, shark encounters, rationing calculations, the ships that didn't stop, the arguments, the silences, the days when hope was very thin, and the days when it was slightly less thin. She wanted it preserved. It was brought aboard with her. The Pacific Ocean is 64 million square miles of water. A 50-foot sailboat is a fragment of debris on a surface that does not notice it. The mathematics of being found, of a search reaching the right coordinates at the right moment, of a Navy vessel happening into range of a distress flag that had been flying for 5 months, are not reassuring mathematics. And yet, Jennifer Appel and Tasha Fuiava are alive. The log is a real document. Zeus and Valentine came home. What endures from their story is not the dramatic surface of it, though the dramatic surface is real and earned. What endures is the image of two women on a drifting boat, doing the next necessary thing, and then the next, and then the next for 5 months, because that was what the situation required. They were not trained survivors. They were not extraordinary people in the way survival stories sometimes require their subjects to be. They were two women who ran out of options and refused to run out of will. They kept watching the horizon. Eventually, something came over it. If this story moved you, like and subscribe. There are more stories waiting. Stories of ordinary people who found themselves in extraordinary circumstances and chose every single day to keep going.